They say survival belongs to the strongest, but Isabella had learned that true power lies in appearing powerless, hidden behind trembling hands and a wheelchair's cold metal, her wolf buried so deep that even she sometimes forgot it existed. 10 years. 3,650 days of calculated weakness. Each morning she woke in the cramped servants' quarters of Moonridge Palace, whispering the binding ritual that kept her wolf chained, that kept her scent human, that kept her alive. The incantation grew more painful each passing season, like swallowing glass while her beast clawed for freedom that would never come. She had been 15 when the hunters came, when her pack burned, when her father's dying command sent her fleeing into the night with instructions to disappear. So she became Bella the cripple, Bella the broken, just another war orphan grateful for scraps and a corner to sleep in. No one questioned a girl whose legs didn't work, whose hands shook when she polished silver, who flinched at loud noises like a beaten dog. No one suspected that beneath her frail human facade lived the last heir of the Navarro bloodline, alpha-born, alpha-bred, alpha-hidden. Before we continue, please, click subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, and even the United Kingdom, so let me know where you're listening from. Now at 25, Bella sat in the pre-dawn shadows of the palace courtyard, her wheelchair positioned near the servants' entrance, as she mended linens with the methodical rhythm that had become her meditation. The other servants called her fortunate. The irony made her wolf snarl behind its cage. Fortunate because she'd survived when her entire pack hadn't. Fortunate because the palace kept her fed while refugees starved beyond the walls. If only they knew she was the very thing their hunters sought in the forests, the bloodline their new Alpha King had supposedly eradicated in the border wars. The courtyard gates burst open, bringing dawn light and chaos. "The king returns!" Head Steward Marcus shouted across the stones. 3 days early from the northern campaign. Prepare the victory banquet." Bella's hands stilled on the fabric. Alpha King Vincent Caruso, the warrior who had claimed his throne 2 years ago through combat and cunning. The same Alpha whose wolf could supposedly detect deception from across a battlefield, whose eyes gray as winter storms saw through every mask and pretense. She had managed to avoid direct contact for 2 years, keeping to the shadows during royal functions, disappearing into servant corridors whenever his presence filled the palace like smoke from a wildfire. But sometimes, in the deep of night, she felt him, a pull like gravity, like drowning, like every instinct she'd ever suppressed, screaming that he was hers. The servants erupted into motion, but Bella remained frozen, linen clutched in trembling fingers, because she could feel it now, his presence approaching the palace like a storm rolling over mountains. Her wolf stirred beneath her human skin, recognizing something in him that terrified her more than any hunter's silver blade or uncle's vengeance. "Bella," Marcus barked, "stop sitting there useless. We need the ceremonial cloths prepared for the king's table." She forced herself to move, wheeling toward the storage rooms, but her hands shook for reasons that had nothing to do with her act. Today felt different. The air itself held its breath. Strange signs had been appearing lately. Servants whispering about wolves spotted within the palace gardens, dreams of silver eyes and ancient wars, iron gates that sometimes grew warm without cause, as if the very metal remembered what it was forged to kill. As she worked, memories surfaced unbidden. Her mother's scream as the pack house collapsed in flames, her father's final transformation, buying her seconds to escape while hunters closed in, the night she learned to break her own spine, to make the paralysis real enough to fool even werewolf senses, to swallow her alpha light until only shadows remained. The weight of being the last, the only. The survivor who lived by becoming everything her bloodline was not. By the time the sun crested the eastern peaks, painting Moonridge's gray stone walls gold, the courtyard buzzed with preparations. Bella had just positioned herself near the fountain unobtrusive, forgettable when she heard it. Footsteps in the colonnade beyond. Not the hurried scramble of servants or the measured pace of guards, but something else. Deliberate, predatory, hunting. The footsteps stopped directly at the courtyard entrance. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to shift and flee this place forever. But she couldn't move. Her wheelchair held her like a prison of her own making. And beneath her skin, her wolf writhed in recognition of what stood beyond that archway. The shadows parted. Alpha King Vincent Caruso stepped into the courtyard, and the world fell silent as death. He was exactly as the rumors claimed, tall enough to make grown warriors look small, shoulders broad as war itself, with hair dark as midnight, and a face carved from stone and shadow and violence. But it was his eyes that stopped hearts, storm gray with flecks of gold, holding the weight of every battle ever fought, every secret ever buried. Those eyes swept the courtyard, past bowing servants and bubbling fountains, past everything and everyone, until they found her and stopped. The world narrowed to that singular moment, the Alpha King staring at a crippled servant girl, while something primal and undeniable sparked in the space between them. For 10 eternal seconds, neither moved. The courtyard held its breath while Bella's heart hammered against her ribs. Too fast, too hard, too loud. Could he hear it? Could he smell the lie? She forced herself to bow her head with the others, keeping her eyes fixed on her useless legs, on the wheelchair that had been her salvation and her cage. "Your Majesty," Marcus stammered, dropping to one knee. "We weren't expecting, forgive us. The preparations are not yet. Rise." The king's voice rolled through the courtyard like distant thunder, deep enough to shake foundations, to wake sleeping wolves. Bella's beast howled in answer, and she bit her tongue until she tasted blood, desperately shoving her wolf back down, back into the dark, back into the lie. "I came to inspect the staff personally," Vincent continued. And even through her panic, Bella could taste the deception in his words. Alpha Kings didn't inspect servants at dawn. They had stewards for that. Whole hierarchies of officials to ensure their palace ran smoothly. She kept her head down, hands folded in her lap in the picture of submissive disability, while every nerve screamed warnings. Through her peripheral vision, she watched his boots' black leather worn from battle move between the assembled servants, drawing closer, 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 until they stopped directly in front of her wheelchair. "You." His voice rumbled above her, vibrating through her bones, through her blood, through every carefully constructed wall she'd built around her truth. "Look at me." Bella's world had narrowed to those boots, black leather, battle-worn, close enough that she could see mud from the northern territories still clinging to the soles. "Look at me," Vincent repeated, and this time it wasn't a request. Her hands trembled as she slowly raised her head, carefully, the way a broken thing should move, uncertain, afraid. She'd perfected this choreography over 10 years, the hesitant lift of the chin, the way her eyes took too long to focus, the slight flinch as if expecting a blow. But when her gaze finally met his, every practiced gesture shattered. His eyes were wolf, not human pretending at control, but pure predator wearing a man's face. Storm gray irises ringed with gold that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, searching, dissecting, knowing. She felt those eyes like hands on her skin, peeling back layers, hunting for the truth she'd buried in her own broken spine. The mate bond hit her like lightning. Her wolf surged against its chains, howling recognition, screaming mine so loud she nearly gasped. Every instinct commanded her to bare her throat, to submit, to claim, to shift, and show him what she truly was. The pull between them was gravity and madness, inevitable as sunrise, terrifying as the fall before impact. She watched his nostrils flare, scenting her. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath stubbled skin, and for one impossible moment, she saw her own shock mirrored in those wolf gold eyes. He felt it too. "Your name," he demanded, voice rougher now, barely controlled. "Bella, Your Majesty." She kept her voice small, damaged, human, forced her wolf down with brutal mental claws even as it screamed to answer its mate. "Bella Navarro." Something flickered across his face at the surname. Recognition? Suspicion? But it vanished before she could decipher it. "How long have you served in my palace, Bella Navarro?" His palace, as if these stones belonged to anyone but the ghosts of those who died building them. Her father had stood in this very courtyard once, before the wars, before the purge, when Navarro wolves ran free. 10 years, Your Majesty, since the border conflicts. 10 years. He said it like a death sentence, like he was calculating exactly how long she'd been hiding under his roof, breathing his air, bleeding red when she should run silver. "And in all that time, you've remained, confined to your chair?" The question carried weight, accusation wrapped in silk. Around them, the courtyard had gone deadly silent. Every servant frozen, every guard watching. Marcus hovering nearby, wringing his hands, confused by his king's sudden fixation on a crippled nobody. "Yes, Your Majesty." Bella dropped her gaze, let her shoulders curl inward, became small and broken and beneath notice. "I was injured in the wars. I'm fortunate the palace. Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Her eyes snapped back to his, and she saw it there, burning beneath the suspicion. The same desperate recognition clawing through her own chest. The bond pulling tight between them like a rope around her throat. "You'll attend the victory banquet tonight," Vincent said, and though his words were measured, she heard the wolf beneath them. "Hunting, circling, I want all my household present." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons, and they both knew her careful decade of shadows had just come to an end. Vincent dismissed the other servants with a wave, but his eyes never left Bella's face. The courtyard emptied in hurried footsteps and nervous whispers, until only Marcus remained hovering uncertainly by the fountain. "Leave us," Vincent said quietly. Marcus opened his mouth, glanced at Bella with something like pity, then fled. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bella's heart thundered so loud she was certain he could hear it, could count each terrified beat against her ribs. Her wolf paced beneath her skin, restless and yearning, making it nearly impossible to maintain the binding ritual that kept her human. Vincent circled her wheelchair slowly, boots scraping against ancient stone, predator assessing prey. Each step brought his scent closer, pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf whimper with need. "You smell wrong," he said finally, stopping behind her where she couldn't see him. She felt his presence like heat against her spine, raising every hair on her neck, like lavender and lies. Her fingers gripped the wheelchair arms until her knuckles went white. "I don't understand, Your Majesty. Don't you?" He moved around to face her again, crouching suddenly so they were eye level. This close, she could see the wolf swimming just beneath his skin, could feel his breath against her cheek. Everyone in this palace has a scent. Fear, ambition, lust. Simple, readable, honest. But you. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "You smell like a storm about to break, like something ancient trying very hard to be new." Bella forced herself to meet his gaze, to keep her breathing steady even as panic clawed up her throat. "You're frightening me, Your Majesty." "Good." But his voice softened, confused by his own intensity. His hand finally dropped. "You should be frightened. Do you know what I am, Bella Navarro?" "An Alpha King," she whispered. "A hunter." He stood abruptly, putting distance between them as if proximity pained him. "I've spent 5 years rooting out traitors and rebels. I can smell deception the way others smell rain. And you." He turned back to her, those storm-gray eyes burning with something between suspicion and desperate hunger. "You reek of secrets." The mate bond pulled taut between them, singing with tension. "I have no secrets worth an Alpha King's attention," Bella said, and the lie tasted like ash. Vincent's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then you have nothing to fear at tonight's banquet." But they both knew that was the biggest lie of all. He should have left then. Should have returned to his council chambers, his war maps, the 100 responsibilities that came with a crown forged in blood and battle. Instead, Vincent found himself rooted to the courtyard stones, unable to look away from the fragile creature in the wheelchair who made his wolf howl like the moon had finally answered. "Tell me about the border wars," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Where were you when they came?" Bella's face went carefully blank, but not before he caught the flash of raw agony in her eyes. "Does my king enjoy the suffering of crippled servants?" "I enjoy the truth." He moved closer again, drawn by that inexplicable force that had been pulling at him since the moment he'd crossed into palace grounds 3 hours ago. He'd planned to enter through the main gates, to accept the formal welcome his station demanded. Instead, he'd found himself detouring to the servants' entrance, following a scent he couldn't name, hunting something his wolf insisted he needed to find. "And I think you've been hiding from it for a very long time." Her pulse jumped in her throat. He could see it, that rapid flutter of vulnerability, and his wolf wanted to press its mouth there, to feel her heartbeat against his tongue, to taste whether her blood really ran red or if it would shine silver in the morning light. The thought should have repulsed him. He'd spent years eradicating the old bloodlines, the Alpha families who'd refused to bend knee, who'd chosen war over peace. The Navarros had been among the most resistant, their entire pack eliminated in a single night of fire and silver, or so he'd been told. "I was in a village," Bella said quietly, and he heard the careful construction of her words, truth mixed with omission. "When the hunters came. My family didn't survive. I barely did." She gestured to her legs with a bitter smile. This was the price of survival. Vincent crouched again, unable to stop himself from getting closer. This near, her scent overwhelmed everything lavender and lies. Yes, but underneath something else. Something that made his wolf want to roll in it, claim it, protect it with fangs and fury. "Show me," he said. "What?" "Your legs. Show me the scars." Panic flashed across her face, quickly masked. "Your Majesty, that's hardly appropriate. I've seen 1,000 war wounds, Bella Navarro. Blade, arrow, fire, silver." He watched her flinch at that last word. "Interesting. Each leaves a signature. I want to see what kind of signature crippled you for a decade." She stared at him with those two bright eyes, and he saw the calculation happening behind them. The weighing of options, the desperate search for escape. "No," she said finally, lifting her chin with a defiance that made his wolf purr with approval. "I may be a servant, Your Majesty, but I'm not a curiosity for your entertainment." He should have been furious, should have reminded her that alpha kings didn't accept refusal from anyone, let alone broken girls in wheelchairs. Instead, he smiled. "Tonight," he said, standing. "At the banquet. We'll continue this conversation. And if I don't attend," his smile sharpened, "then I'll come find you. And trust me, Bella, you don't want me hunting you in the dark." The rest of the day passed in agonizing slow motion. Bella retreated to the servants' quarters, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn her wheelchair through the narrow corridors. Other servants whispered as she passed, their eyes hungry with speculation. Did you see how the king looked at her? What could he possibly want with Bella? Maybe he's finally gone mad from all the killing. She locked herself in her tiny room, barely more than a closet with a cot and a cracked mirror, and pressed her palms against the cool stone wall, trying to remember how to breathe. Her wolf clawed at its chains, frantic and yearning, still screaming mate with every heartbeat. "Stop," she whispered to herself, to the beast inside her. "Stop, stop, stop." But the bond had been triggered. There was no unknowing it now. No unfelt what had passed between them in the courtyard. Vincent's scent was embedded in her lungs, his wolf-gold eyes burned into her memory, and every instinct she'd spent 10 years suppressing roared to life with vengeful hunger. A knock at her door made her jump. "Bella?" Marcus's voice, uncertain. "The king sent something for you." She opened the door to find the head steward holding a dress. Not servant's wool or cotton, but silk, the color of midnight, trimmed with silver thread that caught the hallway light like captured stars. Her stomach dropped. "He can't be serious," she breathed. "He also sent this." Marcus handed her a sealed letter, his expression caught between confusion and concern. "Bella, what's happening? Why is the king fixated on you?" "I don't know," she lied, taking the dress and letter with numb fingers. "I don't know." She closed the door and broke the wax seal with shaking hands. Vincent's handwriting was sharp and precise, like claw marks on parchment. "Bella, you've hidden in shadows for 10 years. Tonight, you sit at my table, in the light, where I can see exactly what you are. Refuse, and I will carry you there myself. V." The dress felt like a trap in her hands. Silver thread, the color of wolf's blood. He was testing her, pushing her toward exposure, and she had two choices: attend the banquet and risk everything, or run and confirm every suspicion prowling behind those storm-gray eyes. Bella looked at herself in the cracked mirror, at the girl who'd survived by becoming invisible. Tonight, invisibility would no longer save her. Tonight, she would have to decide how much of the truth she was willing to die protecting. The great hall blazed with candlelight and menace. Bella had never seen it like this, packed with visiting alphas and their entourages, warriors still wearing the dust of battle, nobles draped in furs and jewels like predators dressed for a hunt. The air thick with competing scents, dominance displays barely leashed beneath civilized veneers. She'd managed to dress herself in Vincent's midnight silk, though her fingers had fumbled with the laces. The gown fit perfectly, as if he'd somehow known her measurements, and the silver threading caught every flicker of flame, making her shimmer like moonlight, making her impossible to ignore. A servant wheeled her to the high table where Vincent sat, his eyes tracking her progress through the hall with predatory focus. She felt every gaze turn toward her, heard the whispers rise like a tide. Who is she? Why does she sit with the king? A crippled servant at the high table? Vincent stood as she approached, a courtesy that silenced the room. He reached down, and for one heart-stopping moment, she thought he would lift her from the chair. Instead, his hand closed around hers, thumb brushing across her knuckles in a possessive gesture that sent sparks racing up her arm. "You came," he said quietly, for her ears only. "Did I have a choice?" His smile was dangerous. "No." He seated her beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed, close enough that his scent surrounded her like a claim. The bond hummed between them, growing stronger with each point of contact, and Bella struggled to maintain the binding ritual that kept her wolf caged. The feast began with toasts and boasts, warriors recounting battles won and enemies slain. Bella picked at her food, hyper-aware of Vincent's presence, of the way his attention kept drifting to her even as he conversed with visiting dignitaries. Then a voice cut through the revelry, smooth as poison. To the victorious Alpha King, and to the ghosts of those who fell before his conquest. Bella's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice, had heard it in nightmares for 10 years. Slowly, She turned toward the speaker standing near the far end of the table, wine glass raised in mock salute. Darius. Her uncle had aged since the night of fire and blood, his dark hair now streaked with silver, his face carved harder by years of exile. But those eyes, cold, amber, calculating and cruel, were exactly as she remembered. The eyes that had watched her father burn. The eyes that had smiled while her pack screamed. He wore the colors of a northern delegation, his presence here perfectly legal, perfectly positioned to destroy everything. An interesting toast, Vincent said mildly, but Bella heard the edge beneath his words. You are? Lord Darius Thorne, Your Majesty, representative of the northern border clans. Darius's gaze slid past Vincent, landing on Bella with deliberate precision, though once I went by another name, when the old family still ruled these lands. Vincent's hand moved to the knife at his belt, a subtle shift that every alpha in the room registered. The old families are dead. Eradicated for their treason. Most of them, yes. Darius took a slow sip of wine, his eyes never leaving Bella's face. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, paralyzed like prey beneath a serpent's gaze. But you know how it is, Your Majesty. Sometimes a seedling survives the fire, hiding, waiting, growing strong in the shadows. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Warriors shifted, hands drifting toward weapons. Vincent's wolf pressed against his skin, visible in the gold bleeding into his irises. If you have an accusation to make, Thorne, make it plainly. Not an accusation, Darius smiled, setting down his wineglass with deliberate care. A demonstration. You see, I've spent years studying the old magics, the rituals our kind used before we learned to hide among humans. His hand slipped into his coat, withdrawing a small vial of silver liquid. This, for instance. Moon water, blessed under a blood moon. Harmless to true humans and loyal wolves alike. He unstoppered the vial. But to those wearing false skins, hiding their true nature. He began whispering words in the old tongue, the language of ancient packs, of alpha bloodlines that predated kingdoms. The silver liquid rose from the vial like smoke, spreading through the hall in tendrils of mist. Bella felt it the moment the moon water touched her skin. Her binding ritual shattered like glass. The wolf she'd caged for 10 years surged upward with a howl of freedom, and she couldn't stop it, couldn't hold it back, couldn't. Her eyes flashed silver, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for Darius to see, for his triumphant smile to spread wide, for him to raise his hand and point. There, do you see, Your Majesty? Hidden in plain sight, a Navarro heir, alive and well, sitting at your own table. The hall erupted in chaos. Guards drew weapons, nobles scrambled back. Vincent shot to his feet, and his roar silenced them all. Enough! The command cracked through the air with alpha dominance that forced every wolf to their knees. Every wolf except Bella, trembling in her chair as her carefully constructed facade crumbled, and Darius, who remained standing with vicious satisfaction painted across his face. Vincent turned to Bella, and she saw the war in his eyes. Duty versus instinct, truth versus the mate bond screaming at him to protect what was his. Is it true? His voice was rough, barely controlled. Are you Navarro bloodline? Bella met his gaze, and for the first time in 10 years, stopped lying. Yes. The hall held its breath. Vincent's hand remained on his knife, knuckles white with tension, while every instinct visible on his face warred between execution and protection. The mate bond pulled taut between them, singing with pain and possibility. Guards, he said quietly. Clear the hall. Now, Your Majesty, one of his advisors started. Now. The hall emptied in a controlled stampede. Nobles and warriors fled, shooting glances over their shoulders at the crippled servant who just confessed to being the very thing their king had sworn to destroy. Darius remained until Vincent's wolf surfaced enough to make his eyes pure gold. You too, Thorne. Before I forget the laws of hospitality. Darius bowed with mocking grace. Of course, Your Majesty, though I do hope you'll remember Navarro blood carries consequences. For everyone. He left with measured steps, trailing threat behind him like perfume. Then they were alone. King and hidden heir. Mate and enemy. The silence stretched unbearable until Vincent moved, not toward her but to the massive doors, barring them with a timber thick as a man's waist. Stand up, he said, his back still to her. I can't. Stop, lying. He turned, and his face was raw with something between fury and anguish. If you're Navarro bloodline, your legs work perfectly. The paralysis was part of your disguise. So stand up, Bella. and let me see what you really are." Her hands trembled on the wheelchair arms. This was it, the moment that ended either in her death or her freedom. Slowly, carefully, she pushed herself upright, her legs held. For the first time in 10 years, Isabella Navarro stood at her full height, the binding ritual shattered completely, and her wolf surged through her veins, strengthening muscles that had atrophied from disuse but never truly broken. Silver light flickered beneath her skin like lightning. Vincent inhaled sharply. "God and Moon, you're the last of my line, the heir my father died protecting." Her voice came out stronger now, edged with the alpha power she'd suppressed. "And your mate, apparently, which is either fate's cruelest joke or its most perfect revenge." He laughed, a broken sound. "You think fate is cruel to you?" He crossed to her in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the weight of something ancient pressing on his shoulders. "Bella, I didn't eradicate the old families because I wanted to." "What are you saying?" Bella's voice cracked. Vincent's hand lifted to his chest, fingers pressing against the fabric of his shirt as if touching a wound. 5 years ago, when my father died, I inherited more than a throne. I inherited a blood curse, one forged by the old alpha families themselves during the first wars. He met her eyes, and she saw centuries of torment reflected there. Every alpha bloodline I allow to survive strengthens the curse. It feeds on alpha power, growing until it consumes me and everyone in this kingdom. Bella's breath caught. "That's why I hunted them, why I killed them." His jaw clenched. "Why I burned your pack to ash, Bella. Not from hate, but from necessity. Each alpha family I eliminated weakened the curse, bought us time." He stepped closer, his hand lifting to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "And then you appear, my mate, the one wolf in all the world I'm bound to protect. And you're the very thing that will destroy us both." The mate bond thrummed between them, painful and undeniable. Bella leaned into his touch despite everything, despite the confession that he'd murdered her family, because her wolf understood what her human heart struggled to accept. He'd been trapped, cursed, forced into becoming the monster that haunted her nightmares. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "If there is, we have 5 days to find it. The blood moon rises then, and the curse." The palace bells began to scream. Attack bells, warning bells, the sound of invasion. Vincent's head snapped toward the doors. "No, it's too soon." He couldn't have. The timber barring the doors exploded inward, shredded by claws and dark magic. Through the smoke and splinters, Darius emerged, but he wasn't alone. Behind him surged wolves, rogues, and exiles, the remnants of destroyed packs, all wearing the same silver chains that pulsed with ritual magic. "Touching reunion, niece?" Darius called out, his form beginning to shift, bones cracking and reforming. "But I'm afraid I can't let you two solve that pesky curse. You see, I've spent 10 years gathering what your beloved king left behind. The broken, the vengeful, the cursed." His smile was all wolf now, all fang and fury. "And tonight, we take back what was stolen." His wolves poured into the great hall like a flood of teeth and violence. Vincent shifted instantly, his massive black wolf placing itself between Bella and the attack. But she stood frozen, paralyzed not by her false disability but by the sight of her uncle's forces, faces she recognized from her childhood, survivors she'd thought dead, now twisted by vengeance and dark magic. One of them locked eyes with her. "Traitor! Sleeping with the butcher while our families rotted." The accusation hit harder than any claw. Bella's wolf erupted. 10 years of suppression, 10 years of binding herself into weakness, shattered in a single heartbeat. Silver light exploded from her skin as she shifted, bones reforming with a sound like thunder. And where a fragile girl had stood, an alpha wolf now blazed white as moonlight, eyes pure silver, power radiating from her like a second sun. The wheelchair clattered, forgotten to the floor. She hit the first rogue mid-leap, her jaws closing around its throat with precision her father had taught her lifetime ago. The wolf fell, and she was already moving, dancing through the chaos with Vincent at her side. Their wolves moved in perfect synchronization, the mate bond turning them into a single weapon. Where he struck high, she went low. Where she feinted left, he tore through from the right. But Darius was coming, massive and dark, alpha power corrupted by years of twisted magic. He crashed into Vincent with the force of a avalanche, sending the black wolf tumbling across blood-slicked marble. "Did you really think you could have both, niece?" Darius snarled, circling Bella. "Your mate and your vengeance? Your love and your pack's honor?" Bella's wolf growled, but beneath the sound, her mind raced. The curse, the blood moon, the alpha power feeding it. And suddenly, horribly, she understood. Darius wasn't trying to kill Vincent. He was trying to trigger the curse early, using the violence and alpha bloodshed to accelerate it. She could feel it now. Dark magic spreading through the palace like poison, feeding on their battle, growing stronger with each wolf that fell. Vincent struggled to his feet, blood matting his dark fur, and Bella saw the curse beginning to manifest, black veins spreading across his skin, his wolf form flickering as the magic tried to consume him. 5 days, he'd said. But they didn't have 5 days anymore. They had minutes. Bella shifted back to human form, standing naked and blazing with silver light in the center of carnage. "Uncle, you want Navarro alpha power?" She spread her arms, calling on bloodline magic she'd never dared touch. "Then come claim it." Darius's eyes widened with hunger and suspicion. "What are you?" "The curse feeds on alpha bloodlines," Bella shouted, her voice carrying over the chaos. "But what if an alpha bloodline feeds it willingly? What if instead of being consumed, we redirect it?" Vincent shifted human, understanding dawning despite his pain. "Bella? No, trust me." She met his eyes across the hall, the mate bond singing between them. "Trust us." Darius lunged, but Bella was ready. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.